Okay. Okay, so I just want to start by saying a massive thank you again to the Hungarian Vegan Society for putting on such a wonderful event. Yeah. I want to extend a personal thank you to everyone involved for inviting me over and for giving me this opportunity to speak in front of such a wonderful crowd. I feel so incredibly privileged to be here, and I'm so grateful for all of you for making my stay so welcoming and for inviting me with big open arms. So a big thank you truly from the bottom of my heart to everyone in the Vegan Hungarian Society and to all of you for being here tonight. So I want to start what I'm going to say tonight by talking about my vegan journey to begin with. Now, my vegan journey began 3.5 years ago, and it began when I came across a piece of news in the media which was talking about a truck full of chickens crashing on the motorway. Now, the journalist was talking about how this truck was full of thousands of chickens, and they were on their way to the slaughterhouse when they had their accident. The journalist was saying that hundreds, if not thousands of these chickens were already dead and had died on impact, whereas hundreds more were laying on the side of the road, mutilated, dying slowly in terrible pain. And one of the things that really upset me about what the journalist was saying, he was just saying that some of the chickens were still alive, and they'd found freedom for the first time in their life, and they were running into the fields nearby trying to escape. And I felt so terrible for these chickens in that moment. I felt so upset for them. But then I realized one thing. The only reason the chickens were in that truck at that time heading to the slaughterhouse was because I paid people to kill them so that I could eat them. And as such, it was my fault the chickens were there, dead or dying on the side of the motorway to begin with. And this was a groundbreaking moment in my life because it was the first time that I attributed feelings and emotions like pain and fear and terror onto the animals that I ate. Throughout most of my life, I'd realized that dogs and cats, the animals that I loved, could feel these emotions. But for whatever reason, I disconnected from the fact that the animals that were killed for me to eat and to wear also felt these emotions. And in that moment, I realized that it would be morally hypocritical of me if I continued to eat their flesh whilst feeling sorry for them in that moment. So from that time on, I decided to go vegetarian quite simply because I wasn't aware of what happened in the egg and dairy industries. And I was a vegetarian for about 8 months, and then my partner started saying to me, we have to watch this movie called Earthlings. We have to watch it. And I said, I don't want to watch that. Like, being vegetarian is enough. I'm not paying for animals to die. How wrong I was. But then one morning she put Earthlings on, and I was almost forced to watch it. And I'm so very grateful that I did, because it was from that moment onwards that I realized the magnitude and the severity of the ways that we treat animals. And the fact that it transcends far beyond just the fact that we eat them. And it's almost in every aspect of our lives. So from that moment, I decided to go vegan, but I was one of these vegans who was very, very cautious about being preachy. I didn't want to be labelled an extremist, so I kept very quiet for quite some time. And then one day my friend said something to me. They said, but soy farming is really bad for the environment. And I didn't know how to respond to that. I didn't know what to say. And it really bugged me and made me angry because I felt in that moment I'd enabled them to continue eating animal products because I couldn't respond and debunk the argument they'd used against me. So I made a promise to myself at that moment that I would do everything I could to research as much as I possibly could. So never again in the future would someone say something to me that I couldn't respond to. And this was the beginning of me becoming an activist, finding my voice and finding that drive and that passion inside of me to speak up for the animals. From that moment on, I became a vegan activist, and I did everything I could to learn as much as I possibly could. And I made that vow to never once again be silent when someone asked me something that I couldn't respond to. So I started then going out into the streets, interviewing people. I started going to protests. I started campaigning. And one of the things that people say to me, which I really, really appreciate, is people say you're very calm and you listen. You're very empathetic when you talk to people. And people say, well, don't you ever feel angry? And my response is, yeah, I feel angry all the time. You know, I'm an angry vegan. I feel that passion, that fire, that drive inside of me. I look across the world and I see the injustices that are done to animals and to humans and to the environment, and it makes my blood boil. That's why I get out there in the first place. That's why I get out there on the streets. And we should feel angry. We should look at what's happening in the world and feel that rage inside of us. Now we need to only consider that annually, every single year, we slaughter 56 billion land animals and so many marine animals that scientists predict that it's in the region of 2 to 2.7 trillion. Every single one of these lives that is taken is an individual that wanted to live and deserved their right to live, just as we do. And yet for no necessary reason, we take their life from them. We butcher them and we mutilate them. We slaughter and kill 3,000 animals globally every single second. And billions of these animals are raised in places called factory farms, where they're denied access to sunlight and fresh air. We forcibly impregnate them. We take their babies off them. We mutilate them by castrating them, chopping their teeth off, cutting their tails. We do untold horrors to these living beings that feel pain, they suffer, they feel terror, and inherently, they just want to live. And then when they're of no use to us anymore, or they're ripe to be slaughtered, we put them in trucks. We send them to slaughterhouses, where we hang them upside down, and we cut their throats whilst they're still babies. And these animals, they scream in pain. They want to live. They beg for mercy. And as a species, we turn our ears away. We turn our eyes away. And we pretend these things aren't happening to them anymore. In fact, we've reduced them from being living beings to being inanimate objects. We classify them as livestock, like the stock you find in a supermarket. We've reduced them to numbers, denied them their personalities, denied them their individuality, and reduced them to nothing other than property for us to use at our disposal. And the thing is, when we raise and kill animals, it doesn't just kill the animals, it's destroying our environment. Nearly all the major environmental degradations that we're currently facing as a species can somewhat be attributed to our consumption of animals. Animal agriculture is responsible for more greenhouse gas emissions than the entire transportation system combined. It's the leading cause of species extinction, oceanic dead zones, topsoil erosion, and a whole host of other problems that we are currently facing on our planet. And eating animals is causing our leading diseases and illnesses. Things like heart disease, certain forms of cancer, type 2 diabetes, strokes, osteoporosis, hypertension, dementia. The leading killers of people here in the West. Diseases and illnesses that have no doubt affected some of your friends, your family at some point in your lives. These can all at least be somewhat attributed to our consumption of animals. But most importantly, a switch to a plant-based diet can not only prevent them, but can even reverse and treat many of them as well. And if that wasn't bad enough, currently on our planet, there are nearly 1 billion people in a state of hunger. Yet we have grown enough food to feed up to 12 billion people. The reason for this is because the food that we grow, we feed to livestock animals instead. In fact, 82% of starving children live in countries where food is grown to feed livestock animals. So when we eat animals, we're taking food from starving children, starving mothers, starving fathers, and leaving them out there to die from malnutrition, all because we value the taste of steak and bacon more than their lives. And you'd think with all this damage, all this destruction, and all this death, that the reasons we be doing these things to animals would be necessary, important, and vital for our survival. But in reality, the reasons that we eat meat boil down to 4 factors: taste, convenience, habit, and tradition. Not because we have to, not because there's nutrients found in animal flesh that we need to survive. No, it's because we enjoy the taste of their flesh and their secretions, or because it's more convenient for us to do what we've always done rather than learn a different way of life. It's as simple as going into a supermarket and buying a different option, but for some people that's too hard, and that's the challenge we face, to make veganism seem easy, to make veganism tasty, to make veganism accessible to people. Now, one of the things we always get told as vegans is that one person can't make a difference, that you as one person won't make a difference. However, veganism is one of those times where it only takes one person to make a massive difference. Now, you see, every time we go into a supermarket or a restaurant, a cafe, or wherever it may be, and we buy the vegan option, we're voting with our wallet for the world that we want to live in. So every person, every one of you in here today has the power to make this world a much better place by your actions alone. So never be disheartened. Never take what they say at face value, because you have all the power to change the world, all the power to inspire people, to light that fire inside of someone and make them switch and do something important with their lives, to save the lives of all the animals and the environment itself. Now, I used to believe that veganism was the moral baseline, but I've realized since then that that's not true. And in fact, it's vegan activism that is the moral baseline. And there's an analogy I like to use that summarizes why this is Makes perfect sense. And the analogy says there is a man beating a dog with a stick. A second man comes down the road and he sees the first man beating the dog. Now the man with the stick says to the second man, I have another stick. Why won't you come join me and we can beat and kill this dog together? Now the second man is faced with three options. The first option he can take is he can say, sure, I'll pick up that second stick, I'll beat that dog with you. If you're doing it, it must be morally acceptable. The second choice the man can make is he can say, I see what you are doing. What you are doing is wrong and immoral, and as such, I will not participate. Now, the second choice the man can make is veganism. Veganism is non-participation. It's seen in action or an industry that you don't agree with, and it's saying that you will no longer participate in that industry or action. Now, the third option the man can make is he can say, I see what you are doing. What you are doing is wrong and immoral, and not only will I not participate in the action of beating that dog, but I am actively going to intervene and stop you and save the life of that dog. Now, the third choice the man can make is vegan activism, because it's the only choice the man can make that actively saves the lives of animals. And that's why vegan activism is the moral baseline, because it's the only choice that we can make in our everyday life that saves the lives of these animals. Now, every single one of us here tonight is vegan because we care about the animals, we care about our health, and we care about the environment. We all want to see a world where animals are treated with respect, dignity, compassion, and kindness. This is the world that we dream about, the world that we fantasize about, the world that we want to create. And the question we have to ask ourselves as individuals and also as a community is, what are we going to do together to create the world that we also desperately dream of? Now, when I look out in front of me, I see a room full of brave, courageous individuals. Each and every one of you have your own unique strengths, your own unique skills, and your own unique talents. Each and every one of you can do something for this movement that is profound, that is amazing, that could change the world for so many living beings. Every single one of us has a moral obligation to do what we can, because if we were in their position, we would expect those who cared and said they loved us to fight on our behalf. What if it was you in that farm? What if it was you being forcibly impregnated? What if it was you in that truck on the way to the slaughterhouse, or you hung upside down with a knife against your throat? What if it was you in the wild trying to escape the hunter, or you in the laboratory tied down for tests? What if it was you in the circus being psychologically tortured to perform tricks? And what if it was you begging for mercy, crying for someone to help? What would you expect of us in here tonight? What would you expect of the people who said that they wanted to save you? What would you expect of the people that said they wanted to see a different world? Would you expect them to be silent, or would you expect them to rise up, use their voices, fight for you? Now, I want to take some time now to talk about two profound experiences that happened this year that changed my life forever. The first experience was when I visited a dairy farm for the first time. And on this farm, I knew what I was going to see. I knew I was going to see animals stood knee-deep in their own feces, in their own excrement, caged in with no room to escape. I knew that I'd see animals with fear and terror in their eyes. I knew that I'd see animals enslaved with no sign of mercy and no sign of escape. But what I didn't expect to see that day was the separation of a baby from their mother. And the farmer allowed us to see this. Now, I remember seeing the child being put in a trailer and watching the farmer wheel her away from her own mother. I remember watching her mother, walking alongside her mother, as her mother desperately tried to get her baby back. And I remember seeing the farmer close the gate on that mother, and I looked into her eyes, and in that moment I saw the terror, the despair, but most upsettingly, I saw the confusion, because she couldn't understand why. I followed the calf as she was put into a solitary pen, and I sat with her, and I gently touched her face, and she was so newborn, she was still warm, and she still had her mother's womb juices all over her body. And I sat with her, and I touched her face. And in that moment, I realized something. I realized that I could get up and leave whenever I wanted to, that this place was not my prison, this place was not my life, that I had the ability to stand up and leave whenever I wanted to, but the calf in front of me and the mother behind me would never be given that basic liberty. This was their life. This was their prison, and it would be eternal and never-ending until the day that they died. So I made a vow to myself that day, and the vow I made was that with every second of life that I had, While blood was still pumping through my veins and oxygen through my lungs, I would fight and do everything that I could so that one day there would never again be babies and mothers separated, whose fate would be the same as these babies and mothers in front of me on that day. I made a vow to fight with every day of my life for these animals, these innocent beings who need us to fight on their behalf. Because if they could defend themselves, they would, but they can't. So they need us, the people who have the ability to stand up and use our voices and use our energy and use our lives to do good. They need us to do everything that we can with the life that we have to defend them and make sure that animals in the future will never have to suffer the same fate as they do. Now, the second experience I wanted to talk to you about was when I was in Manchester, a place in the UK, and we went to a slaughterhouse that kills pigs. Now, this slaughterhouse kills pigs by gassing them with a very horrible concoction of CO2 that literally burns them from the inside out. Now, at this slaughterhouse, you can go around the side, and you can go right next to the kill floor. You're about 15 meters away from where the animals are being killed. And you can hear them being loaded into the gondola. You can hear as the gondola comes down and drops them into this pit that's full of CO2. And you can hear them as they scream and thrash and beg and eventually die. And these animals scream and thrash and beg for up to 30 seconds, and you can hear the pain. You can hear them banging against the metal cage, trying desperately to escape. And for them, death is a mercy, because it's the only time in their life that they will not have suffered, that their suffering and pain will have ended. And once the gondola of pigs is finished with those pigs, it comes back up, and there's silence for about 30 seconds. And then you can hear the next load of pigs being loaded, and the screaming and the thrashing continues. And this cycle occurs day after day, after day, after day, after day. And I remember standing there, crying. But at the same time, I almost felt grateful, not for what was happening to these animals, but that I could be there and I could hear it. Because by hearing it, it made it so much realer to me. And when I felt that, it built up that drive, that fire, that passion inside of me, and it made me more determined than ever to make sure that these CO2 chambers would once be empty forever. Now, the animal agriculture industries want us to pretend that these animals don't exist. They want us to pretend that their suffering is not real. So when we go and we see these animals, whether it's in the slaughterhouse, in the farm, wherever it may be, when we hear their screams, when we look them in the eyes and we acknowledge their suffering, we're doing exactly what the industries don't want us to do. We're seeing them as individuals. We're recognizing their existence. We're saying to these animals that I see you, I care about you, I will fight for you. You are not property to me. You are not a number to me. You are not an inanimate object to me. You are a living being. I feel your pain. I hear your pain. I see your pain. And to me, you are a beautiful individual, and I will not forget you. Now, in the UK, we have something called saves, vigils, where we stand outside slaughterhouses and we bear witness to these animals as they're taken in to be killed. Now, when the trucks of these animals arrives and we stop them and we give them comfort, we go up to the trucks and we say, I'm sorry. Now, for me, when I say sorry to these animals, I'm not just saying sorry to the ones in the truck at that moment. I'm saying sorry to all the ones that had their lives taken from them by me. Because for almost 21 years of my life, animals suffered and died for me so that I could eat their flesh and wear their skin. Now, most of us weren't born vegan. And that's a horrible realization to have, the realization that animals were killed on our behalf for however many years. The realization that we've been lied to, tricked and manipulated by these industries to do something that goes against our innate compassion. Now, for me, when I say sorry to these animals, I'm asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for forgiveness for all the animals that suffered in pain because of my choices. Now, there are so many different ways that we can be active and do our bit for the animals. You don't have to do what I do. The important thing is that you do something, that you push yourself to do something that may take you out of your comfort zone, that you do something that maybe terrifies you today. Because I know when I started, I felt fear and I felt anxiety too. But when you put into perspective the lives and the suffering that these animals endure, our anxieties, our pain, our fear is nothing in comparison. So we have to do something today and tomorrow and every single day that we have life to fight for these beings. We have to find what it is that we enjoy, what we can use, what skills we have, and what talents we can utilize to be active, because we all need to be out there doing something. Now, when I'm old and looking back on my life, I want to see that things have changed, that there's been significant improvements in our world. When I'm old and looking back on my life, I want to say, how the hell do we used to raise animals in farms, cut their throats, and have the audacity to call it food? How the hell did we put animals in cages in fur farms or lead cows on death missions across India so that we could skin them and call it fashion and clothing? I want to say, how the hell do we tie animals like rabbits down to laboratory tables, pour chemicals in their eyes and dare to call it cosmetics and beauty? When I'm looking back on my life, I want to see that we have woken up as a species, that we have made changes, that we realized the error in our ways and we said no more will we be complicit in the continuation of these industries. When I'm looking back on my life, I want to see a world that has changed. But I understand that the only way that I will see that improvement, the only way I will see a new world is if I fight for it today and every day. Now, future generations will turn to us in this moment now, the time when we have the ability to make the world a better place, the time when we had the ability to save our planet and save the lives of trillions of animals. Future generations will turn to us, point to us, and say, what did you do? What did you do when you had the chance to change the world? What did you do when you were presented with the evidence, presented with the facts, given the knowledge? What did you do when you had a chance? Now it's up to us now as individuals, as a species, and also as a community to ask ourselves, what will our answer be to those generations when they turn to us and ask us that question? Now, there's no more time for complacency, there's no more time for apathy, and there's no more time for excuses. We have to start now, today. From this moment on, we make that pledge and we make that vow that with every second of life that we are given, we fight for those who need us to fight for them. There is no more time for us to sit on our hands and pretend that the suffering that the world and the animals are enduring is not happening. Now is the time for us to wake up, do what we can, and fight for a better world together. Thank you very much.